Hello, good afternoon to everybody, and I'm very pleased to welcome you as this web event organized by our specialized group of wholesalers group, and of course by EuroCommerce. And this event is dedicated to wholesale sector. It's a sector that perhaps you don't know, so I think you will learn a lot, and this is the idea, because it's a huge sector, but very often below the radar, and that's why we choose the title to lift the veil to the wholesale. Let me introduce this afternoon by remembering you that you learn that at school, business school, that the producer produces the product, but the wholesaler buys all the product by lorry, by pallets, and then split it to the retailer who sell it to the end consumer. This is still true, but you know that more and more producers, with the data they have, now try to sell directly to the end consumer. We can imagine that one day Michelin, the tire producer, will be able to sell directly the tire to the end consumer. And more wholesalers who have this big warehouse with so many SKUs that, of course, with their website, they sell to the end consumer directly. And of course, we have also retail companies who are so big that they want to diversify their customer and try to sell to handcraft or intermediate company. And finally, the end consumer try to sell also the product because they want to prolong the life of the product and sell it again to what we can call wholesale of customer of data platform, where he can sell again the product. And this revolution between the different companies, what do you think about Alibaba? Is Alibaba a wholesaler or Alibaba a retailer? This is all the revolution we have to face, and that this is kind of topics we will have the pleasure to discuss together. In order to lift the veil on this sector, let me give you some figures, tremendous figures about the importance of this sector. We have around, let's say, a little bit less than 2 million companies in EU implicated in wholesale. They employed around 10 million employees, which represent 5% of the total EU employment, which is incredible. And we estimate that the added value of these companies is 660 billion euro. So a tremendous sector who is working in different ecosystem. Wholesaler is everywhere in all the sector, and we are very pleased this afternoon to have different sector, the food industry, with metro, the pharmaceutical, the chemical, the electric. We have wholesaler in all parts of the economy, and we have a great representative of all this sector this afternoon to share in different panel with us. In this sector, most of the company are very small company. 91% of this company are small company, and when I speak small company, is less than 10 employees. The rest is SMEs, around 10 to 200 employees. But we also have leaders and world leaders, and I will come back again at the end of my speech with Sonepar, which is the world leader and a very big company. This afternoon, we will have some panel about the challenge this company has to face, because the wholesale sector has to face, like all the other sector, of course, the digitalization of the sector, of the company, of the world, and of course the sustainability, and we will see how they contribute specifically in the sector to improve the world, and what is their contribution in supply chain, and how they improve the way they supply all the product. Of course, during the COVID, some of the company were hardly hit and trying to survive, like many of us companies, and we are very happy that we start a new recovery period. And some of us, which were on the right sector, who supply, for instance, hospital with mask or some disinfectant, make a big and a huge exceptional year last year. To finish my introduction, I will have the pleasure to introduce Philippe Delpech. Philippe Delpech is Chief Executive Officer of Sonepar. Perhaps you don't know Sonepar. I know well Sonepar because Sonepar is a family-owned company from north of France, and it's not a small company. They realized last year 23 billion euro. They are implemented in more than 40 countries, and it's the world leader, #1 in the sector, selling pieces of electric equipment. So, Philippe, we are very pleased to welcome you, very pleased that you dedicate some time with us in order to explain what are the challenge of Sonepar, how you develop and you digitalize the company, and what you are doing to improve the sustainability of the world with Sonepar. So, good afternoon to everybody. I hope you will enjoy this event. I'm quite sure that you will learn more about this sector. And Philippe, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great pleasure. Thank you, Regis, for the introduction. Very nice of you. I think the two topics you've taken as specific topics today, circular economy and wholesaler at the heart of Europe, are very important and very interesting, and I'm sure you will enjoy the afternoon. I'm going to give you the perspective not only of Sonepar, but more of the B2B distribution world. And I will make a distinction between B2C and B2B because we have different challenges, even if some are common, but there is some specificity between B2B and B2C. And I think Sonepar is a good example of B2B transformation challenge. If we go to next slide, or first slide. Okay, I think you can move to next one. Let me start by telling who is Sonepar. First of all, the name Sonepar is not very well known because historically, Sonepar name was the name of the holding, the financial holding, and we were using trading name by countries. This is a change, and I will explain you why. With digitalization, Sonepar is becoming more and more a trade name. We are a B2B electrical distributor, which means every electrical product manufactured by a manufacturer goes to an installation through us. We are selling anything from plugs, cables, pipes, to really install electricity. Last year, we did 23 billion euro sales worldwide. We are on the 5 continents. About 80% of that goes to the building industry, everything you have in your house, in a building, in your office. And 20% goes to electrical installation in the industry itself, which is assembly line, manufacturing line for the industry. We are #1 in 11 countries, #2 in 3 to 18, which means that we are not only the world leader, but we are 50% bigger than the #2 and twice the size of the #3, which means we have a significant leadership, and you will see also later on that this is a critical strategic information. We talk about big numbers. We have 45,000 employees. We are managing 1 million order line a day. We have 1.2 million active customers. We have 3,000 branches to serve the customer around the world. It's really a big data job, and also digitalization plays an important role. And the last data I will give you on that, we already have 6 billion euro sales online. 3 years ago, we were the number 12 company in the world, bigger than eBay. Also, people don't know that because we are not on the B2C, but it's already a very large part of our sales channel. Going to next page. Now, I'm going to make some people on the line very jealous, but we are in electrical B2B distribution in a growing market forever. I mean, forever being at least half a century, the next 50 years, and because you start to see people, companies, and countries publishing objectives for 2070 of especially CO2 emission. Why is it such a good market? I mean, electricity is driven by 4 key elements. One is population growth, more people, more electricity usage. Even better, more people in city, more urbanization, more electricity usage. You use about 70% more electricity if you live in a city than in a farm. The third point is electrical power share. In 1969, 52 years ago, 9% of the power in the world was electrical. The rest was fuel, fossil power. I mean, oil, coal, whatever you want. Last year or 2 years ago in 2019, this 9% became 19%, which means over 50 years, electricity gained 10 points of share on the power market. Now, the prediction for 2030, only 10 years from now, is 30%, which means electricity will gain the same share in 10 years that the electricity has gained in 50 years. The reason for that, of course, is electrical car and electrical everything, I would say. And the final reason is the number 1 polluter vertical in the world is building. A little bit because of construction, but massively because of usage during the life of the building. Building in the 70s, before the oil crisis, was number 3. Transportation and industry was polluting more. Building was number 3. Today, because of the fact that transportation and industry made progress, population growth and urbanization created a lot of buildings, and it's difficult to fix a building base because when you have, like in Europe, very old buildings, to make them energy efficient, it takes a lot of work and a lot of regulation. But if we don't do it in the world, there is no way to cap the temperature increase of the planet to 2 degrees C, which means for the politician and for the regulation is a mandatory vertical to address, is that buildings are more efficient. And what happens when a building is more efficient? There is much more intelligent system, much more electrical system, and that increases our market significantly. Of course, you have cycles, and we have some downturn, upturn, which are not very big in the building, by the way, except 2009 financial crisis, which was a subprime-driven industry cycles. But as mentioned by Regis, we are a family company. We are not really only quarterly focused. We are really yearly focused, long-term focused, which means the green line for us is more the line who makes strategic decisions more than the blue. And having worked 30 years in listed company, not including the New York Stock Exchange, I know that the blue is really a deep pressure on CEOs, which have to report to the board and to the market every quarter. Next page. This is Sonepar. I mean, we are number 1. We are 23 billion. By the way, we only lost 1 billion compared to the best year ever, 2019, during the COVID. Why? Is because the building industry resisted very well to the COVID crisis, and we didn't suffer as much as the other segment. We had over 20 years, 8% CAGR, which is massive on these numbers. About half of that was organic growth, 4%, and 4% was acquisition, external growth. But if you look on the left, the market we serve is 420 billion. And a first answer to Regis's comment, about 34% of the market is served by the manufacturers and 66% by the distributors. That has never changed. Before digitalization today, it's a third to third and very stable because the base of customer we serve, and I will explain on the next slide, is really a distribution base. But if you take 420 by 66% and you look at the 23 billion we have, we are number one, 50% bigger than the number two, but we only have a bit less than 10% market share. Which means the opportunity to continue to consolidate that market is phenomenal. And I do believe that in B2B distribution, whatever the segment you are, one of the key strategies for you in the future is to consolidate and really get density, productivity, and number one position. Otherwise, I don't think you will have a sustainable profitability long term. Next page. I'm not concerned about the future of distribution because I think our role is becoming more important today than it was yesterday, and I don't think any supplier can do in B2B electrical do what we do. Why is today suppliers in the world are by hundreds and the top suppliers by 10th, the distributors by 1,000 in the world, the top distributor by hundreds, and the customers are by million. I mean, we have 1.2 million, let's say, you have perhaps 4 or 5 million electricians on the planet. It's a phenomenal, which means you have to manage a very large number of customers. The product offering is becoming wider and wider because of the complexity of the building. The logistic is very influenced by the B2C and the Amazon of the world, which means customers today order at 9 p.m. to be delivered on site, on the job site the day after at 6 a.m. Very complex order, all on time because productivity of the customer is driven by that. And they will do an omni-channel type of relationship. They will come to the branch, they will give a call, they will send a mail, they will go online, they will go on the cell phone, and they expect on any channel, the omni-channel, to have the same level of service, information, and answer from us. That level of complexity is so huge and increasing every day that requires an incredible supply chain. And the customer, of course, is buying product from 20, 30 different suppliers that he wants in the same box in the morning in the job site. And today we got sustainability and circularity coming in, and I think we are going to discuss, and I will give you my view. And you have to do that at very low cost because you cannot, I mean, you have to keep your costs under control. Assortment complexity, the timing, 11 p.m., 6 a.m., anywhere in the country, and the accuracy. Any mistake you do on the order is a job derail, is productivity loss for the customer, and he will not come back to you. He will come back to somebody else, which means our role is not at risk. I think it's reinforced. We are really at the center of the economy of Europe, but you cannot be amateur anymore. And you cannot be handcraft anymore because you have to be highly professional, highly automated to be able to deliver the service at a very low cost. Next page. Which means it's a big transformation for, I'm sure, all of us on the call, which are in B2B distribution, but even more for the large corporation like us, which are operating in multi-countries. Because historically, it's a local business. I mean, that's a reason why we kept so many brands that we acquire, is that somebody in New Zealand knows that brand, somebody in Australia or Western Australia knows that brand, somebody in Italy knows that brand, and we have the tendency to keep that with quite a lot of autonomy. With this new trend of digitalization especially, but not only, we are obliged to change the business and the leadership model, and we have to rebalance very strong global initiatives and strategies, keeping a local pride and autonomy and local attitude. And that has been a big change we operate in the last 3-4 years in Sonepar in order to have a global leadership, to have global governance and policies. I mean, we do almost $10 billion in the US, and of course, You have to be careful on making sure you're at the top of the compliance policy. We are very visible corporation, and that is really non-negotiable for the operation. Transformation, you will see in the digital, we have a global worldwide digital factory developing the digital platform for all countries, the 40 countries in the world. It's a difficult project. It's a difficult project because each country has a piece of old system, and you have to manage transformation. You have to capture the requests of the country. All that at the same time, you deliver financial performance, especially cash flow, to continue to invest and acquire and consolidate the market. Which means it's a big change in most of the country, most of the company, and you have to be capable to manage that leadership, new leadership model, keeping the good of the past, but adding the good of the future. Next page. Which means the opportunity we have in front of us, and I think it's also true for many companies on the call. I am mid-50s. I'm born and raised in the 30 years of globalization. I mean, during all my time, we became more and more global. We moved more and more factories. I spent 30 years in manufacturing to low-cost countries. I mean, the 80s, mid-80s, China opened and became less closed, and a lot of factories moved to Far East. And we drove the profitability of the world that way by reducing cost every year, benefiting to the end-user customer at the cost level, not always at the employment level, because factories left developed countries to go to emerging countries. Today, I think we are facing a different challenge. First, the digital enterprise, I mean, digital processes inside, digital interface with customer outside is the new norm. And the generation born with an iPhone will only consider that as the way to communicate and to operate. It's very good for efficiency. It's very good for productivity. It's very good for cost. It's very good for customer retention when they like your platform. But it's a big change when you are a company which exists with traditional processes to become a digital enterprise. We have to accelerate growth. We have 10% worldwide market share. I think we need to go to 20 perhaps one day, which means really it's a capacity to identify acquisition, acquire, integrate, and also manage organic growth with your sales organization using more digital tools to manage the market. I think we have new challenges. I don't think our employees will join the company or stay in the company in the future if you are not really serious about your sustainability agenda, and if you're not really serious about diversity and inclusion. I think these two pillars, I think sustainability is on the table. We are very serious, but if you look at it, what we have done to the planet is not sustainable, which means we have to change. And to change is not easy. And if we don't change, I think we will face a very serious issue. If not us, our children will face that. And diversity and inclusion is a must. Today, what people expect from us is not negotiable. I think it's gender diversity is not good in distribution. Inclusion is not always good, at least at management level. And I think that will be very important pillars for the future and very important challenges for the companies. Next page. I will close on the two key really challenges, digital enterprise that I'm sure all of you face in the world. Few advices or few things we have done, I think are very good. First of all, in the 40 countries, 3 years ago, we did what is the digital enterprise roadmap to become a real digital enterprise. I mean, fully automated supply chain, fully automated interface with customer. What is every step of the way of IT, supply chain CapEx, HR profile, education of people we have to do. You see that small image under a digital enterprise. That page exists for each country over 5 years, and we do it, I mean, really box by box, project by project. We have a visibility on the CapEx to do that. And that is really, there is no amateurism. You have to be very professional, very planning process in order over 5 years to transfer 40 countries from the stage they are to a real modern enterprise. And that also requires digital architecture, because historically IT in the country was built by the country. And that is key to make sure you have the right one. We don't standardize ERP worldwide, but we have a standard architecture which also help on the cybersecurity, which as soon as you're a digital enterprise is a key point, because we have more attacks today than we had when we were less digital. And the first success we have seen is today, every month, we have a data lake of 90% of our sales extracted, and we can see KPIs consolidated that we never saw before. And we can communicate those KPIs to our suppliers against, of course, money, because it's a data contract. But our suppliers love it, because they will never get those data without wholesaler and distributor organized the way we are. And it's an incredible, let's say, agenda. And the most important, I would say, is the Sonepar Digital Factory Spark. The digital architecture of our system is designed in one place for the world, and we roll out that place in terms of interface with customers. And I give you an example. Search engine, it's a very competitive feature on your digital system. If you're not on the first page of Google, you don't exist in our life. And to be on the first page of Google, you need to have a very sophisticated search engine. Today, it's designed in one place for the world, and we don't have 40 countries who try to do something average. Next page. Sustainability, the building by itself is the most polluting vertical in the world, and we serve that building. If we sell a good solution in the building, it will stay for 20 to 30 years. If we sell a bad solution, it will stay for 20 to 30 years, which means we have a huge responsibility towards the future. And we try really to manage and push our sales force, our experts around the world to guide the market. And we do that through many aspects: education, incentives. It's a big program. It's complex because you also fight against the customer. The customer, when you are in B2B electricity, they try to do the same thing they have done on the previous job or things they have learned at school, because for them, productivity is the most important to make money. If we tell them that's a new solution, it's better for the planet, you have to convince him that it's reliable, it's easy to install, which means for us, education, pricing policy, incentive, convincing him, it's very, very important, but it's very, very key for sustainability. And the last point, I think, is an area where we are, if we go to the next page, where we are really bad is circularity. There is few areas, and I have been the president of Carrier Air Conditioning, and we did a fantastic job with the EU following the ozone layer issue, to convince that the gas was bad and that you had to track it like a chemical, and that not everybody can touch it, that you have to recycle it, that you have to treat it. And that was a phenomenal law where today, not a kilogram of gas, if you follow the law, in the entire EU is treated properly. And that was a very good job done by the manufacturers working together with the installers and distributors and the politician in Brussels. I think in our world, electrical, we are very bad. It's much bigger than air conditioning in terms of size. You have a lot of waste when you renovate houses, when you do a new sites. That waste is not properly treated. And the wholesaler is at the heart of that, because we have the branch, we have the proximity, we could collect the waste, we could transfer the waste to proper company to treat them. And I think for us in Europe, in many fields, especially in B2B, but I believe perhaps in B2C, I'm not a specialist, we have a key role to play. And I think the governance and the political laws are far behind what we could do. And I think Europe could be a lead in that way. And I'm sure the platform you will have today discussing about it will pinpoint a lot of opportunity. It was a pleasure to address you. I hope you know better Sonepar, and some of the challenges we have are close to your challenges. I do believe the B2B distribution is going to have an incredible opportunity in the next decades. Now, there is also challenges that we have to face: transformation, digitalization, inclusion, diversity, sustainability, but that makes our job great and that makes our job exciting. And I wish you a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delpech, for a very inspiring session on the challenges facing a company like Sonepar, and in particular for the highlights on sustainability and the sustainability transition. So welcome, everybody. I will be your session moderator for this first panel. Our discussion will be today, during this panel, it will focus on sustainability, the circular economy, how wholesalers contribute within their ecosystems, what are the key obstacles, and how the European Union can help them. So we just heard from Mr. Delpech the importance for a wholesaler like Sonepar to invest in sustainability. The Commission has announced a series of actions supporting the move towards a more circular economy. The idea is to maintain the value of products and materials as long as possible. Moving to a circular economy model is a significant challenge. It entails a fundamental change in the business models. For example, when looking at products, how to define sustainable products, services, leasing, aftermarket, repair, infrastructure, efficient waste collection, sorting, recycling, and people, consumers, and skills. The discussion will be interactive. You can raise your question to panelists using Slido. Our discussion partners this afternoon will be Dorothee Arns, Director General, European Association of Chemical Distributor, Salamari Muronen, CEO of the Finnish Electrotechnical Trade Association, Thierry Meunier, Executive Director, Chief Financial and Innovation Officer at Nexus Automotive International, and William Neal, there you are, Advisor for Circular Economy in the European Commission's DG Environment. So I will ask the wholesalers representatives here to briefly introduce your organization and sector, and in 2 minutes, spell out what the circular economy means for your business or your sector, and why this is a priority for you. Dorothee, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you for your kind introduction, Crystal, and thank you to EuroCommerce for having me today. So 3 minutes to introduce quickly what chemical distributors are doing. So we are basically between chemical manufacturers and the next industries who use our products. We partly also produce, because we take what the manufacturers produce and formulate it or blend it, package it. So we have all sorts of different value chain activities with us. So we are also active in many different segments, ranging from petrochemicals and fuels to life sciences like pharmaceuticals. And the sector itself stands for 30 billion of annual turnover and for 30,000 highly qualified jobs. So that's briefly what our sector stands for. What circular economy means for us is, first of all, a competitive advantage, a business model, but also resource efficiency. We are a sector which is predominantly dominated by small and medium-sized enterprises, in many cases family-owned businesses, which have their roots in their respective regions for generations. So, and strong roots to the neighborhood anyhow. So it comes already with the tradition. and to keep a sound and sustainable business and also the environment in place for next generations. So that's for us a commitment. And since we compete globally and also with a lot of direct sales from producers directly to other customers, we always have to be better than the rest of the world and to be quick to respond to upcoming trends and to make sure that we always act in a sound and sustainable way. So that's it in a nutshell.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Dorothée. Salamari, from an electrotechnical point of view in Finland.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for EuroCommerce as well as the EW for having us to represent the wholesalers on the electrotechnical field. STK, which is the Finnish Electrotechnical Wholesalers Association, is probably due to the Nordic pragmatism, we are one of those associations that represent both the wholesalers as well as the manufacturers and importers on this field in Finland. And we have been together for 90 years now, so we're celebrating our anniversary later this year. Our take on successful circular economy is simply that it's a combination of activities over the life cycle of the product supported with relevant digitalized data. So I claim that there cannot really be an efficient way of doing circular economy on our field either without data. And that I hope we will be talking about also later with this panel.
So thank you for raising the importance of digitalization and data for circularity. Thierry Meunier, from the automotive spare parts wholesale perspective. Hello, Thierry. I will suggest that we ask William to share your perspective. So from a Commission perspective, what are your priorities and how what is the Commission doing to support the move towards the circular economy?
Yes, thanks, Crystal, and thanks to Doris and Salamari. I hope that we managed to get our other guest back. Yeah, I mean, first, what is the circular economy? I think it's important. I mean, there are still many misconceptions, I think, around the panel here. Everybody's on the right line, but I think that it's important to remind that it is tackling many things. What you could do, I mean, I like to imagine it as a big river, a river of resources flowing through the economy. And they arrive upstream as bioresources and minerals and metals and so on, and chemicals. And they exit the other end as waste and emissions. And it's what we do with them whilst they're in the economy which matters, and that's what provides well-being and value and profits. And we have four possibilities, in my view, during that period. One is what I think it was Dorothée was emphasizing, which is the resource efficiency. We can narrow the flows. So just like we've seen, I mean, labor productivity has been really driven by higher labor prices. And I think that higher resource prices and more scarcity will drive resource productivity. And there are huge, there's huge potential there. I mean, I heard that a modern building, mostly modern buildings, probably require about 30% less steel and cement than they actually have in them. So we can really, at the design stage, do a lot there. So that's narrowing the flows. Then we can slow down the flows, and it's I equate to sort of making the river into more of a lake. And the idea is to keep the products and assets that embody all of those resources in the economy for longer. So that means designing them to last longer, to be durable, providing spares and services so that you can upgrade, repair, refurbish, reuse and remanufacture those products and assets. Thirdly, we can use regenerative flows, so we can use more renewable and bio-based resources. And lastly, and it is the last one, and this is the misconception about circular economy very frequently, is by recycling those material flows. But of course, once you've created the waste, then you've lost most of the value already. So we need to avoid getting to that stage for as long as we can. So that is how we see circular economy, and all of those four have an economic logic and can be driven by profit. Where there is value, where you're retaining value, there are possibilities to profit, but they do involve challenging the linear models that we have today, which are based on sort of shifting stuff, which I think, of course, Wholesale is very much involved in that model, but I think wholesalers also have a lot of potential to move to more circular models and are very important in that. If I'm not, tell me if I'm going on too much, Christel, but I could say a little bit about what the Commission is doing now to address circularity.
Yes, that would be fine.
We've since a year, just a bit more than a year, we've had our Circular Economy Action Plan up and running, and we're implementing that now. And I think there are three main facets or elements of that which are worth really drawing attention to. The first is that we take a very systemic approach, and the first time we did this, I guess, was in the plastic strategy in 2018, where we really tried to address all stages of the product cycle. And this year we will be addressing textiles, fashion and textiles, and circular electronics. And next year we will be going on to deal with construction and construction products. But the idea is really that we're a regulator, we produce legislation, and legislation also, it obviously has a very important economic effect, not just in punishing polluters, but also in providing certainty for investors and for businesses, and providing a level playing field and a clear direction. But what we've tried to do with plastic strategies, and we will try to do with the future strategies, is to also get the economics right. So looking at how to ensure steady public and private demand and public and private investment, and also creating the right incentives along the value chains, because quite often the problem might be in one place, but the solution is somewhere else, and quite often you need to bridge those split incentives. So that's one thing, the sort of systemic approach. The second that I would focus on, and I could maybe talk about this in more detail later if people are interested, is the focus on the product. And I think this is really groundbreaking and fundamental. We for the first time, I think, anywhere, we're using single market tools to address sustainability and circularity. And the idea is that, in Europe, we are big consumers. We've got 450 million consumers, and we have tools to be able to control, or at least have minimum standards for what we allow on our markets. And as was said earlier, I think design is so important in sustainability. It really defines a lot of what happens later in the value chain. And if we can get rid of the most wasteful, damaging, and worst performing products from the European market, that will really be a very powerful tool. And I can go on to explain how that will work if we have time. But the third thing, I think, which is important and maybe relevant for all the participants today, is the focus on consumers. And we are looking with our colleagues in the Justice Directorate General, working on consumer law. We're looking at how we can make a reality a proposal for a right to repair and the right to have access to spare parts, for example. And also we're looking at how to tackle the cynicism that has grown amongst consumers about green claims. There are so many labels around these days. Of course, the EU Eco label is the gold standard, but there's a lot of confusion, and we are working to see how we can actually oblige anybody making a green claim about a product to be obliged to be able to back that up with data, life cycle data. So all of that is feeding into our climate objectives and feeding into our recovery plans and sort of stimulus funding for which we're rolling out at the moment with member states. So there we go. I can also come back later maybe and respond to what Salamari was saying about the digital side, because I think that's something which we're working on as well, and I'd be happy to expand on that.
Thank you, William. I understand that Thierry is now on the phone. Are we able to have a line with Thierry? So Thierry, hello, welcome.
Yes.
Great, we hear you and we see you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well. Thank you. So Thierry, can you
okay.
share with us?
I have to apologize, but yeah. I have to apologize, but I have a good reason for being a bit disconnected. Is that my wife is giving birth in a few hours now, and I have to move back to the hospital. So I apologize for that. It's a good reason. It's a sustainable reason.
Congratulations.
Basically, so just in thank you. In short, and I'm very happy of what was just said before, talking about the right to repair and talking about focusing on the customer. As you present us before, Nexus is an international trading group acting in the automotive industry, but especially in the automotive aftermarket industry. We're basically working in 145 countries, and we represent more than 2,600 distributors all over the world. I think sustainability and circular economy are something which are radical and the fundamental importance under our industry. Our industry is very probably the most fragmented and the most traditional distribution sectors that is still existing today, with more than 45 distributors and wholesalers existing only in Europe, more than 350,000 distributors all over the world, but it's approximatively, because in China it's difficult to count. And basically talking about circularity, I would like to say that first of all, we have to, in our industry, we have to pay attention on the fact that there is different level of focus that has been done under the different continent on circularity. That means you have far more advanced situation in North America, for example, as compared to Europe in our side. And if you ask me the question about what's the impact and what's the challenge on circularity in our industry, I would like just to say that, first of all, was it a focus up to 2 years ago, talking sustainability and circularity in traditional industry? The answer was definitely no. It was not a focus up to a few months ago, a few years ago. Is it a challenge that we all need to tackle in the near future? And we bring some new opportunity for the wholesalers? Did bring new business development for our industry, coming from the workshops up to the manufacturers? Definitely yes, and definitely it's one of the key focus that we're trying to address, trying to find new ecosystem and trying to find new business model. So how important is circularity today? I would like to say that circularity is becoming one of the most important topics on which one we are talking about, because it brings a lot of new challenges toward a traditional fragmented distribution sectors. But was it before something that was really the strong focus? I would like to say definitely no. And if we have been committed also with some initiative like Circular Car Initiative or whatsoever, it's because we want prepared a network of wholesalers who need to be better trained and better understand what means circularity and what is the business model about it around that.
Thank you, Thierry, for sharing the perspective from the automotive sector. I'd like to turn to Dorothée now. Dorothée, you have presented the importance of the chemical wholesale distributors and highlighted the importance of SMEs and the traditional anchorage of those SMEs. Can you share a few examples, concrete examples, about what in practice the circular economy means in chemical distribution?
Yeah, of course, I could spend the whole afternoon to tell you about certain examples, ranging from packaging, using the same kind of material or transportation means for a multitude of different business transactions and so on. But since we have different wholesale ecosystems here, then let me focus on the chemicals part, possibly. We have some of our members who have spearheaded and piloted a special new model in Denmark, together with the colleagues from our national Danish association, in a project called GEAR, which was also supported by the Danish Environmental Agency. And the project, let's be non-technical, because I think not all the audience will consist of chemical engineers, most likely. So in very generic words, solvents and acids were the chemicals which were subject to this project. It's widely used solvents and acids as major chemicals for a multitude of different applications. And usually, after the first production process with those chemicals, they would have been disposed as waste, because after this first production process in a different customer business, the purity would not have been good enough, again, to use it. So what the distributors are specialized at, and what is definitely in our DNA, is to have a very specific knowledge about value chains. So which kind of value chains and which kind of players in different value chains can take up this specific product for a different production run. So, and this was the, let's say, also the success of this project, where actually the distributors knew, okay, there is a completely different value chain, but we think this value chain could still use this product. Even now it has, for example, not anymore a purity of 90%, but let's say of 70%. So they contacted the players of the other value chains, and they piloted successfully to give this product into a second production process. And then after the second time, usually at the latest, it would have been disposed as waste. But again, the distributors, our member companies, and we are really proud of that, went to other value chain partners and said, hey, we think you could use that for your production process. Although, unfortunately, now the purity is, let's say, 50% or 40%. Could you try? And they did, and it worked out. So, and that had actually a circularity kind of character for a couple of production runs until the product was really completely done and could really not be used anymore. But in the meantime, it had, let's say, 7 or 8 product life cycles rather than in previous times only one. And this saves a lot of waste, obviously. It saves a lot of emissions. It also saves a lot of other topics like resource of all kinds, also energy and so on, because you can always use the same product. And this is a model that will be now rolled out in the second phase of this project to other chemicals. So we started with some of the most frequently used ones, but we now roll it out also to other chemicals and see that we get the same success. And that is, for us, it was also, let's say, not only showcasing the circular economy model, but also what our sector specifically can do to facilitate and implement in practice circular economy business models, and even give it as an opportunity approach, not only a new life, but also a new business life for our members.
Extraordinary, superb examples of current thinking about the circular economy and how wholesalers can help. Salamari, you mentioned digitization. I'll get there. Digitization to build the circular.
Yeah, that's an awful word.
So how does that work in practice in your sector?
Yes, I'm not quite sure whether it's the sector-wide in the EU, but at least what I've learned, it's on the northern part of Europe. Most of our countries and the associations have built some kind of digital product information databases. And for instance, us, STK in Finland, we have had this product database, sähkönumerot.fi, for already 50 years. So there's another reason for us to party later this year when we can hopefully get together. Of course, the product database in the beginning was not in a digital format because we didn't have internet then. It was more like a product catalog with a lot of information, but it has been in the digital format for almost 20 years now. And that allows, because when you have reliable data on product qualities and on environmental parameters, that's the basis of sustainable decisions and product selection at various stages of the product life cycle. And this may not sound super fancy, but knowing that electrotechnical products are, cables, inverters, KNX, lighting, that usually remain at base in a bigger infrastructure or a building construction. So they are not easily reused as such. But now that we know what the components are, so at the end of the life cycle of, let's say, office building, you can reuse the components and safely rip it apart and maybe take at least the materials there to be reused. But if you didn't know what was there in the first place, you just couldn't do anything much. And I think that's efficiency thing, just like William said, and that safety thing, considering the environment. And of course, it makes sense that you can have the valuable components and materials in the end to be used again.
Thank you, Sonepar. Again, tremendous experience and projects. Thierry, you're back with us, I understand. Can you say from your perspective, what are the key difficulties in concrete terms in the automotive spare part sector? Thierry, are you back with us? Not yet. I think we'll come back to Thierry afterwards. But in the meantime, William, so Sonepar mentioned digitization. 1, 2, 3. We'll get there. And you mentioned the Commission's initiatives on the sustainable product initiatives and the digital passport. Can you say a few words about what is the approach the Commission is taking on those things, and how wholesalers can benefit?
With pleasure. I'm laughing a little bit because I think I've never seen a better excuse for not being able to be present, and I'm hoping that Thierry isn't expecting that he would have to take us into the hospital with him. But yes, I'm happy to try and explain a little bit more. I said already that the Sustainable Product Initiative is really quite groundbreaking because we're using single market instruments, and why it's so effective, because a small or almost zero cost modification at the design stage can really save huge amounts of money and enable major savings and future business possibilities later on in the life cycle. An example would be, a washing machine. If you make it so that you can take out the electronics very easily, when it goes to the recyclers, they don't throw everything into the shredder. They take out the electronics and they can recycle the copper separately, which also means that the steel isn't contaminated with the copper. So it takes absolutely nothing to design it differently. You just make sure you can withdraw it. But why would a producer normally think of doing that? So it's about that's just to give an example of why design can be so important. We have the tools to do that. I mean, eco-design directive has existed for a while, but it's only been applied to energy using equipment and products, and only really used for energy efficiency in the use phase. Now, what we're planning, and we should adopt this by the end of this year, we're at the moment doing our impact assessments and so on. We have a public consultation, by the way, which is open till the 9th of June. So if you haven't already responded to that individually or via EuroCommerce, I would encourage you to do that. We are planning in the Sustainable Products Initiative to expand the scope of the Eco-Design Directive. That is the fundamental part of it. So it could be applied to everything from furniture to textiles and building products to soap or whatever. And it will be aimed at achieving all kinds of sustainability objectives. So extending product lifetimes, improving overall circularity, recycled content, for example, enabling remanufacturing, reducing emissions, and so on. And of course, I mean, there may be some horizontal sustainability criteria, but it will be very much product group by product group, because of course every product group is immensely different in terms of the design requirements. And I think we'll be using implementing acts for each product group. The Sustainable Products Initiative is part of a wider sustainable product framework, and we're also looking at consumer angle, which I explained earlier. I can talk about that if you like, but I'll maybe go straight to the digital stuff, because I think that a very powerful tool that we're bringing in, which should be of great interest to wholesalers, obviously is from what we've heard from Salamari, is a digital product passport. I've said that circular economy is about value retention, and so much of the value of any product now is bound up in the data that's linked to it, and even data that is generated by the product as it travels through its life. And as Salamari said, sectors have been keeping this information in catalogs for 50 years, in databases for 20 years, and they know their products are best. But that data gets lost. It doesn't travel with the product. It's not accessible to those who need it when they need it through the value chain. And the idea of the digital product passport is really to attach the data to the product. And it'll consist basically of two things. One is just a unique identifier, a bit like GS1 uses for the, on the barcodes, or you could use QR code, you could use whatever. And then a set of requirements to make data available, accessible in relation to that product. So you'd have a kind of URL which would take you to the data once you have the identifier. The technology is there, it's available, it's cheap, it's non-proprietary, and you've been using track and tracing and identifiers for decades, I think, in the wholesale sector. I think what will be more challenging is getting the balance right between access to information and the protection of intellectual property and privacy. So that's, I mean, we've just published actually today our Data Governance Act, or the proposal for it, in a public consultation. So that's worth taking a look at. But actually, I mean, we're not going to be asking for reams of new data to be inputted. What we're talking about is very much a use case driven approach. So we're only looking to identify the bits of data which are very important to have in order to be able to keep that value in the system. And as I say, most of that exists already. And we're looking not to have it on a big server in a commission building in Brussels, but in a distributed fashion. So, it could just be on a server of whatever. It could be in Salamari's database that she already has, that it would just need to be made accessible. And I see this being used particularly for business to business use. And we will probably start pretty small in terms of what kind of data we focus on. But I would actually expect that once you have that identifier on each product or each batch of products in the economy, the possibilities are limitless for private actors to then use that amongst themselves. I mean, without the Commission even knowing about it, to actually generate those value chain coordination, which can only really happen if the data is made available. So I don't know, maybe for solvent reuse, this could be a powerful and useful tool if you know what solvents are in what products, and if you're able to do that not just for one value chain, like Dorothy was saying, but maybe it's for a completely different product that you want to use it. If you know that, if it's on the digital product passport that solvent is in that product, maybe then you can, use that information to then be able to actually identify the products that it can be used for. So this is the importance of data, I think, for circular economy. I think it's going to be very big. We've just used the first, well, it's being piloted with the batteries regulation, which we adopted a few months ago and is now in co-decision. That's the first attempt to use it, but now we're looking at really rolling it out to a wide gamut of products.
Thank you, William. I understand that Thierry has joined us again.
Okay.
And because Thierry, during the prep session, you mentioned the importance of data and digitalization for your sector. I cannot hear him. Salamari, I think you wanted to react.
Yes, I wanted. Of course, I would love to give the floor to Thierry if we are lucky enough to have him on stage. But what William just said, it's kind of relieving, but still, I would like to emphasize on behalf of the wholesalers on the electrotechnical field that I would like to remind and maybe, if necessary, later to show you guys what we have done for quite a few decades already. And there is internationally, for instance, ITIM classification standard, the European Technical Information Model, which our system also is relevant with. And I would strongly urge the cooperation nationally as well as internationally in the construction field, for instance, so that there would be a uniform product classification and data, and thus the value chain could avoid having to fill in the product information for each market and each database repeatedly. And what we fear, but William, that was relieving. What we feared was that, oh no, now the governments or the EU is going to have us to fill in the information again to another database and trying to make the most out of updating it. We have interfaces in place already, at least in Finland, so that, for instance, the CAD planning software can use the product information already, so that on that side, the information of the product that is used in the construction goes all the way to the building owner. And I would really, really like to show this later, how it's working and what are the bits of data within the standard, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel again.
So not reinventing the wheel is the key message here. I understand, I'm told that Thierry is back on stage. Thierry, are you able
Maybe
to...
just whilst we wait, I could just reply just to that point. I think that we're very aware. I mean, those of you like Dorothy that are working in the chemicals area will know the experience of the SCIP database and a lot of companies that in terms of chemical registering information and data on chemicals, a lot of companies were not very happy about the extra work that involved. We're looking at an interface approach. Just as Salamari was mentioning, we have our data space, European data spaces, not databases, but data spaces, which are really supposed to be interfaces of existing data. So things like the SCIP database data, product environmental footprinting data, existing data from different places, plus the product generated data would be sort of meeting in that interface and accessible via it. So the idea is certainly not to have to input data many times, but we need to have some kind of protocol. We need to get the stakeholders around the table to agree the protocol so that everybody's using the same language and classification and so on, and that'll be a bit of a challenge.
Dorothee, yes, please.
Yes, William, that is very soothing, I have to say, that you put the stakeholders around the table, because just by listening to the different data formats which are already in place, I get somehow dizzy, I have to say. It seems to be a data jungle. I mean, we don't have a lack of data, but we have a lack of standardized formats to use.
Yeah.
And I mean, we represent mainly small and medium-sized enterprises. You mentioned Skip, the database. We get more and more, let's say, data filling exercises, but not necessarily always with the value added. Yeah. So I think that is something that you are also working on. I think you realized this already at the Commission, and we are very happy that you take this up. But it would be really, really helpful before everybody now invents their own solutions, to bring the stakeholders around the table and really to give a certain approach on certain standardized efforts, so that the sectors have at least a common starting point. Yeah, because otherwise we will all drift away and it becomes a jungle, and then the objectives are not met either. So the efforts, I think we would all better put into bringing this thing into implementation, rather than trying to fill 20,000 different data forms. So that is highly appreciated what you said, and I think you find you push against open doors with us here. We'll be immediately there and help you.
I'll see you at the table.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That's a wonderful achievement of this discussion. Shall we just move on? So your sectors, Dorothée and Salamari, you've shared examples about how you're engaging, why it is important. Now, obviously, it's not easy. Can you share a few examples of the barriers that you're facing, and how the European Union can help? So the digital passport or digitization, B2B data sharing, that's one that we have identified. Are there others that you can share for the audience?
Yes, this is now that William has soothed our minds, me and Dorothea, about that. Yes, we'll meet at the table, and there will not be another database that our member organizations would have to maintain and fill in. So there goes one fear. But there are new challenges indeed. And for instance, in the near future in Finland, we will be required to pass on data on the carbon footprint of any components of a construction. That means also the electrotechnical components, even though they are just a small part, it's part of the carbon footprint of a building. And we definitely need a common way of calculating the carbon footprint for each product. It could be the EPDs that we've heard about, in a commercial product, or it could be the life levels if that goes on. I don't know whether you can shed some light on that, William, but that's a new challenge that we definitely understand the importance of it. But it would be awful if one has to calculate each and every cable and products and inverter on each country that you are selling it to or that you're importing it from. So there has to be a common way of calculating that is accepted Europe-wide, so that we can agree on that and not build any, let's say, trade barriers within the EU, the single market.
Thank you, Salamari. Dorothée?
Yes. First of all, I can, of course, echo what Salamari has already said. It's really standardization and methodology is definitely needed, and also in data formats. The other thing that we are struggling with is the waste directives or the waste regulation, which varies by country to country, but even within the country by regions and even municipalities. I've mentioned that our project started in Denmark, and Denmark alone has 98 municipalities who define what is waste and what is not waste. So, and this kind of different standards, different views, this makes life extremely cumbersome for somebody who wants to use waste as a useful resource. And partly it's not only the variation of regulation, but it's also the, let's say, the uncertainty of what is in the pipeline in future regulation packages. Our output from the project will reach compliance. So from that side, we are okay. But there is also this interface between REACH and the waste directive and the waste regulation, which needs further clarification. And also we have some overlapping regulations, which I have to say lead to a certain view of a jungle as well. So whatever can be done to reduce the complexity there, especially for the small and medium-sized enterprises who don't have armadas of regulatory affairs and product stewards in the house, they have to create turnover and to especially now with COVID-19 and liquidity crunches and so on, to really let's say put all the efforts also to the business. So without reducing or compromising on compliance, it would be helpful if that could be somehow harmonized Europe-wide. And I think this is a major obstacle for the European Green Deal's objectives to be met, and especially if you put the circular economy into practice mode.
Thank you, Dorothée. I hear Thierry is there for last time, a last try. Thierry? Hello. No, it seems to be very... Oh, there you are.
Yes, I have a lot of troubles to have connection, but anyway, I apologize for that.
No, we appreciate the effort and the circumstances. But maybe as we skipped a bit your contribution here and there, can you say something about your concrete challenges and obstacles and how the EU can help?
Yeah, okay. The key challenges in our industry, which is a very fragmented industry, as I said before, is first of all the knowledge of the circularity and the knowledge and the identification of the real business model for all the different layers of our distribution sector. Definitely, when you talk about difficulty, and it was mentioned, I think, before a little bit, I think one of the key elements in terms of difficulty is the fact that there is a significant missing of definition of what we should call a green product in our industry. Are we talking about a remanufacturing product? Are we talking about a repaired product? Are we talking about a new product with specific specification that can fit to some standard in the industry? And this is something which is one of the key difficulty in a market where it's also not so easy to identify the right product. The second element I would like to say on the difficulty for us linked to circularity is the knowledge and the training that are needed in order to better educate, to better give the real knowledge and understanding to the wholesalers, to the workshops, and to the user about the need of more of using more circular products in the way we go and in the way we act for repairing the different vehicles. The third difficulty we face in our industry is moving an industry from a very traditional organization sectors, hyper competitive sectors, if I can say, to movement. You are talking about telematics. We like to talk about mobility. We like to talk about the way the model is changing on the usage of the car. We like to talk about electric vehicle, about
Oh, the line's broken again.
Oh.
Yeah, I have a notification that that the line is broken. But I think we heard some of the key messages. some of the key messages in terms of the lack of definition, the importance of incentivizing consumers. Oh, there you are. And
I'm very sorry. And
I'm sorry, I think we will have
no,
to...
just to try to conclude on that one is the fact that
I'm sorry, we will have to close it. I think that the last point that Thierry was making was the importance of moving the sector and getting the sector to move into a more circular model, given the traditional and very fragmented structure of the sector. Neil, William, you're back here. So
yes.
you've heard all of those experiences and testimonies and points from the wholesalers in the panel. How does that resonate? What do you see? How the Commission can the Commission help? We've heard quite a few things, and in particular the open door, which we appreciate very much. But maybe you want to have a last word on those points.
Yeah, I mean, I come back a little bit to the fact that we can use legislation, but a lot of it is about getting the incentives right. But also, I'm picking up a lot of it is about the information transfer and the data. And just to reply a little bit more directly to what Salomé and Dorothée were saying, and what I think Thierry was trying to get across. When it comes to measuring emissions, it is difficult, and particularly these scope 3 emissions, as we call them, the ones that are not within the power of the person putting the product on the market. They're embodied in the components and the materials that are in their products, and it's quite difficult to measure that. I hope that the digital product passport would be one way of helping that, because of course that data should be coming from downstream and going upstream, and it should be possible for OEMs and so on to actually require their suppliers to provide that kind of data in accessible formats. And I think one of the biggest lacuna, one of the thing that's really missing the most when we're looking at emissions is the embodied emissions. You mentioned the sort of construction sector in Finland having to make this information available, and I've been looking at a lot of the recovery and resilience plans from member states coming in, talking about renovation wave and construction, and they all miss the importance of embodied emissions, and we have to keep reminding them, saying, look, that the energy that is bound up in the materials that you use to construct the building, it takes 20 years of using a building before you've equaled it in terms of the operating energy. So if you don't address that, you're missing a huge part of the puzzle. And we have our in the construction area, we have a new measuring tool Europe-wide, which has been piloted in about 120 different construction sites, and we're now trying to get people to use it, called Levels. You can Google that for more information. When it comes to waste, the definition of waste should be fairly clear and Europe-wide, and we also, for certain areas, we have end of waste criteria, which proved to be quite difficult to do for certain areas. We tried, but there are so many interests pulling in different ways that we haven't gone very much further with that. And in general, the waste legislation should be fairly stable now. We did a big review in 2018, and there are some sort of secondary bits of legislation coming through, like on packaging at the moment. We've got the the interpretation, the guidance documents for single-use plastics and for essential requirements and so on. And next year we've got actually for Thierry, the end-of-life vehicles directive review. But in general, hopefully the legislative area is fairly stable. I think where we really need to work on is not changing the legislation, but implementing it better. And there we really need to be pushing the member states. And for Thierry, I think when it comes to green mobility and what is a green product, and how we can deal with the obvious mutations of the mobility sector. I mean, people are going to be owning cars less. We'll probably have fewer cars on the streets, but they'll be used far more intensively. They'll probably be repaired a lot more and last longer, especially electric vehicles that have fewer moving parts and so on. We're already looking, as I say, at the review of the end-of-life vehicle directive next year. That already requires producers to provide dismantling information for each type of vehicle. It provides that manufacturers of the components used in vehicles have to make available information on dismantling and storage and testing of components and so on. And in the review, I think that we'll be looking at a lot at how we can use information requirements to address those problems, and also some of the sort of locked-in parts, parts which are designed so that you can't actually do anything with them once they, you can't give them a second life. We also need to look at how we harvest components, not just the recycling of the materials, and this is true in many areas, electronics and so on. I think a product passport would be integral though. As I said, that we're testing it first on the electric vehicle batteries. The batteries regulation requires all electric vehicle batteries from the 1st of January 2026 to have an identifier on them. And in the annex to the regulation, you already see set out what data has to be made available. The business-to-business data, which is for the economic actors, which can be encrypted. The business-to-consumer information, which has to be open as a default in any case. And then the business-to-government information, which is more to do with compliance and so on. A lot of that information is dynamic. It's not just something that you say about what is in the product. You can actually look at the efficiency of a battery and say, okay, when it's 65 or 70% efficient, we take it from being an electric vehicle and we use it for energy storage. And that information can also make the market work. The transaction can happen at the right time. You can accurately get up to a good price for the transfer from the vehicle owner to the energy company. So it's really getting that value back and really making it much more efficient and effective. So I think when we start applying the digital product passport more widely, it will be really quite powerful. And when it comes to what is green and what is not green, I mentioned the green claims work that we're doing, but I think another interesting area is the taxonomy. We're working in the Commission with stakeholders, NGOs and businesses to try and define what is green when it comes to financing. And it is really hard work. It's really tough work. We're going into quite a lot of detail, and I'm involved in the sector team which is working on motor manufacturing, and we're looking at, do we look at the process and say, okay, if you want to be considered as green, you're not allowed to inhibit third-party repair. You have to make these bits of information available, or at least to authorized professionals. So I think taxonomy is another area where we are starting to get into that level of detail, and we can really start saying, well, what is green and what isn't green? And we're just doing it in terms of financing at the moment, but I think that will have impacts in the future across a lot of other areas of legislation.
Thank you, William. And indeed, getting the regulatory framework right will be important to encourage and promote more circularity. We have 1 more minute left. Dorothée and Salamari, would you like to have a closing word?
Sure. Dorothée, you want to go first? Okay. I only have a tiny bit to conclude. Like I said in the beginning, I think we guys in Finland have shown you, and with the ITIM, the Northern Europeans have shown that the wholesale industry can and has contributed to circularity with the existing data, and we have been doing and are willing to do it together with the suppliers and customers finally. So we're open to discussions, and we would really like to show our work and the taxonomy or the standards that we have been using in our industry.
Thank you, Sarah Marie. Dorothée?
Yeah, actually, I can just echo what Sarah Marie has already said. Thank you to William also for your openness. We are happy to contribute. I think that came out very clearly. And yeah, together, let's make it work and turn it into an opportunity and not into a threat.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you to you 3 and 4 for a very insightful discussion on circularity and the role of wholesalers. We've heard great examples of projects of wholesalers driving the agenda, pilot testing, and but also sharing the difficulties and how the European Union can help. So I really enjoyed the discussion with you today. Our next panel now will be at 16:30. So stay with us. You have a 30 minutes break, and we'll join again at 4:30 on a panel on the role of wholesalers in the economy. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice afternoon. Bye.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a nice break, and I'll welcome you to our second session. Lifting the veil on wholesale is the title, and what can we better done about it by telling the stories and different stories from the wholesale sector. And I'm very happy to be with you here today, and we have many very nice representatives from all kinds of wholesale sectors. We are starting with the pharmaceutical wholesalers, but there's also a representative from the chemical wholesalers and the technical traders, and also from the cash and carry business. So thank you very much for joining us today, and a very warm welcome also to Christine Schreiber from the European Commission. She is director from the DG Grow and now in charge of the Ecosystem 1. And there everyone is. So, but maybe a very important issue or point when it comes to Ms. Schreiber is that Christine was former director for SME policy with the European Commission, and as the wholesale sector is constructed by 99% of SME companies, I hope that we have a bit to also tell about SME policy and also the interests of SMEs here. So once again, a great welcome to all of you. During the last year, we faced many challenges in the supply chains, and the complexities of supply chain has become quite visible for everyone. Currently, we face huge challenges due to the various disturbances in the highly elaborated system of the International Division of Labor and the interdependencies of international markets. Wholesale is at its heart, and I'm very happy that we get four representatives from the sector, and Ms. Christine from the European Commission. However, wholesale, as you know, is not always visible to the public, and we are trying now today again to tell the story of wholesale and to make wholesale more visible, because we think and are convinced that wholesale plays a crucial part in the supply chain, and they can have much to offer, have much to contribute to the future, to the answer and response to the challenges that we face also with regard to sustainability and digitalization. And I'm very happy that we have quite a bit to hear about it today. Let me introduce our panel. It is Ms. Clara Salaridge, Head of Public Policy EU with Metro. And then there is Bernd Graber, President of GIRP, the European Healthcare Distribution Association, and he's also Director General of the Austrian pharmaceutical wholesale company Jacobi GM Pharma. Also, I would like to welcome Robert Späth. He is Managing Partner as SC Jekyll Chemie GmbH, and he's also board member of BGA and head of our sustainability committee within the BGA. And I would also like to welcome Jan Krückemeier. He's a vice president of BGA, but here it is even more important that he is managing partner of Krückemeier GmbH, technical trader. And last but not least, Christine Schreiber, thank you very much and that you join us today. As I said in the beginning, the best that we can do is to tell the stories directly from the companies. So I would very much like to invite Clara to give us an overview about what your wholesale business is doing and how you cope with the challenges of COVID-19 and what it means for your future business. You have the floor, Clara.
Thank you very much, Gregor, for the introduction. So for all of you who don't know Metro, we are an international company and a food wholesaler with customer focus on the hospitality sector. So HoReCa meaning hotels, restaurants, cafes, also catering establishment, as well as on independent traders. With that, I mean like the small retail shops we all find in our neighborhood. So our customer base is mainly small companies, I would even say micro companies with less than 10 employees. We are active in 34 countries worldwide and in 24 with our cash and carry business, 15 of them in the European Union. So Europe is fundamental for our business. I'm representing here Metro, but also in the panel, the food wholesale, the food service wholesale and the traditional cash and carry business. But the first thing I want to say is that this sector, the food service wholesale and the traditional cash and carry business, is in the process of transformation. This started, of course, before COVID, and this transformation is driven by customer demands, new needs, a highly competitive environment, and of course, other factors such as digitization. We cannot, of course, ignore that. And this means we are also, Metro as such, we are also affected by this transformation. Our slogan is, we always say we want to be the champion for independent businesses. This means that our business is now much more than just transactions. So basically, we are building up partnerships with our customers. So basically, we have evolved from being a transactional wholesaler to becoming actually a provider of integrated solutions for customers. It is not only, it is not anymore about just selling food or non-food products. It is also about providing digital solutions to make their businesses much more efficient. It's about food service delivery, consultancy and financial services, developing e-commerce platforms, so you name it. And everything with the aim of making our customers successful. We call it, this approach, the wholesale 360. So it is not only focused on pure transactions. And as I said, this is a process which started much long before COVID. And what we have seen is that during COVID, we can go deeper into this question afterwards, but having a strong custom HoReCa focus in many countries, our business has been deeply affected. And even if they say, well, you are a food wholesaler, people need always food. But of course, the impact, if we compare to retail, has been completely different. But what we see is that after this period, because hopefully this is going to pass, this approach of being like a provider of solutions is paying off. And we are hoping, and we are actually expecting to come back to a post-COVID work, even with renewed forces, and seeing that this approach is actually rewarding, because it answers our customers' needs. But maybe these are a lot of issues I just wanted to mention in the statement, and then we can maybe go deeper into that. Hey, Gregor, you're mute. Sorry.
Thank you. And after COVID, I might find the microphone button to unmute myself. I have a couple of weeks, I think, to find the button. Sorry for that. Now, Clara, I'm sure that there's a lot of to discuss with all the different aspects, but we very much would like to focus on the stories that we have here. And before we come to our next panelist, I would like to ask the participants to write their questions. If they have any questions in the chat, so we can react to them. Please name the panelist you are having a question to, so we can also integrate you in our discussion here. I would further go to Bernd Grabner from the Pharmaceutical Wholesalers, the president of the European Pharmaceutical Distribution Association. Bernd, please tell us your story.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to take part in this event and to tell a little bit about our daily challenges and the ones that we've been facing through the pandemic. So first of all, I think you mentioned that, Gregor. In my civil life, I would call it, I work for a pharmaceutical wholesaler, a family-owned one, and I'll come back to that later a little bit. We are based in Austria, near Salzburg. have a turnover of around 400 million and 400 employees. So that's a rather small one in our sector. And the association I'm representing today, JIP, is the European Healthcare Distribution Association. We are representing more than 750 wholesalers in 34 European countries. So it's not only European Union, but also other European countries. Our members run 1,260 warehouses with more than 100,000 products each. Probably we have more than 114,000 employees and distribute the incredible number of 15 billion packs of medicines every year, which means 62 million per day. So maybe that figure is a little bit clearer. We supply some 200,000 pharmacies a day and other healthcare professionals, of course. And just to give you a feeling for our service level, between the receipt of an order from a pharmacy or healthcare provider and the delivery, there is an average time of only 2.5 hours. So if you see your pharmacist and he says, okay, I do not have the product that you need in stock, but come back in 2 hours, it's us in the meantime delivering your medicine. Normally, one delivery contains more than 35 order lines, so rather small actually for, I guess, other wholesaling businesses. And we have more than 19 different manufacturers in one delivery normally. And of course, wholesalers in the pharmaceutical sector do not only offer the delivery of medicines to their customers, but it's actually much more. We call it, it's not as sophisticated as it seems to be in Metro, because the market is very segmented. But of course, it's not only the delivery of medicines, it's much more around like IT services, like training opportunities for pharmacy staff. We also do accounting, we do marketing support, so a whole bunch of services around. But when it comes to the SMEs that you've been mentioning before, I think our sector is probably one of the most inhomogeneous ones in wholesaling, because we have everything from a wholesaler running a single warehouse to global wholesalers running warehouses in every continent and also running big pharmacy chains. So it is from an association perspective and from my position in JIP, it's very interesting often to compile the interests of our members. But nevertheless, we've been facing huge challenges throughout the pandemic. I've been mentioning that before, and I guess, Gregor, that we will touch that a little bit later. So maybe I hand over back to you. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce our association and myself.
Thank you, Bernd. And of course, we will touch on that topic later again, because it's a very good example to create the visibility of the role of wholesale and also the challenges that we faced during the pandemic. I would now give the floor to Robert Späth to tell us a little bit about chemical distributors and what he is doing with Jäckelchemie.
Yeah, thank you, Gregor. As you already mentioned, I'm a managing partner of CSC Jäckelchemie. We are located in Nuremberg. We are part of the CG group of chemical distributors. And I'm also in the board of the Association of Chemical Distributors of Germany. So let me tell you just some figures. Chemical distribution is on the very base of the supply chain, because we are dealing with basics like acids, lyes, solvents, or solids used for production, but also more sophisticated products. So there are basically two lines of product: the commodity business, as I mentioned, and on the other side, there's specialty business like raw materials for lacquer and coating production and so on. So our company in Nuremberg, we are of around 100 million turnover and 130 people. The CG group, as the bigger group, is around 800 employees and for around 500 million and something. So the group is delivering 30,000 customers. So the customers are from very big companies from like the Siemens or big production companies, up to the very small companies like just the working people with little businesses. So the German chemical distribution business is a very specialized business. So all over the whole number of companies in the German association is just around 104 companies. It's not too many because it's a specialized branch. And there are a lot of SMEs and just a few big ones. So we have 8 companies of more than 200 million turnover, and the rest is smaller companies up to very little companies specialized in just a few products. So yeah, that's just to tell what chemical distribution. It's very broad, of course, and because we supply anyone who needs basic materials for the production. So it's from the automotive to the life science to the lacquer and coating to also pharmaceuticals, to all these and the food and feed as well. So it's very broad, and of course, well, I think later on we come to the effects COVID had and all these, but this should be the basics for the chemical distribution in the first lane. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Let's quickly skip to Jan Krückemeier. Many of the audience might know him because he is the head of our Committee for European Policy and always our face in the EU. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and having me back again. Yeah, my name is Jan Krückemeier, and I'm representing the technical trade and wholesalers in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Altogether, there's a turnover of 4.5 billion euro with 15,000 employees, over 500,000 customers. And the assortments the technical trade deals with is personal safety equipment, especially very important in Corona times, power transmission, industrial hoses and fittings. But I personally, I'm managing partner of the Krückemeier company, a family-owned SME that was founded over 70 years ago. We are having over 80 employees at several places throughout Europe. And we are specialized in abrasives and adhesive tapes. Abrasives, as you know, these are things to grind certain surfaces, or like from the tape business, you have an anti-sandblasting tape, or here for traffic signs to neutralize them on the highways. But also these kind of small things, especially for the summer season, because you can use them as on a foot file and just replace them, creating less waste because you don't have to throw away the whole file, but only the pad on it. Yeah, these are the basic facts about my association and my company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan, very much for the very plastic examples of product that wholesalers are dealing with. Now, Christine, we are a very diversified sector, as you already have seen here, and it's quite hard to find the common denominator. Maybe the only common denominator is that it is B2B trade. And we are very happy that wholesale is part of the industrial strategy and also of the system of ecosystems. And it is also visible in certain ecosystems, however, not at all. I'm curious about what is your perspective or what is your perception of wholesale when it comes to the industrial strategies, and what are your ideas and what might be the part of wholesalers in the industrial strategy? And once again, thank you that you're taking your time. I know you're busy, and welcome again.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I hope I won't be too long because I risk getting carried away. Then you stop me, please. Indeed, I mean the industrial strategy, or the update of the industrial strategy, was adopted in May, and you may all recall that actually a year ago, I mean a bit more a year ago in March, just I think a couple of days before Europe went into general lockdown, we had adopted the first industrial strategy, and together with it the SME strategy, and I guess we'll come to that a little bit later. I mean, fundamentally, I think there are a number of issues which are very relevant for wholesalers in this context. First issue is, of course, the single market. I think that's in a way also a common ground you all have in terms of interest. I mean, the functioning single market is crucial, and I think if anything, the COVID crisis disruptions last year have showed us how precious the single market is. So you will actually see that for an industrial strategy, there is, I think, almost a surprising big focus on the single market, and I think that's very important. I mean, you've probably seen also the proposal for the single market emergency instrument, which is significant. All the measures on the deepening also of the single market and services. So again, I'll leave it for these keywords, but I think that's very relevant for wholesalers. Then, I mean, you've seen one of the, I would say, new approaches in the industrial strategy is looking at, let's say, Europe through the lens of 14 industrial ecosystems. You are also aware that our DG went through a major reorganization, and this is how I ended up as director of Ecosystems 1, so which is actually covering 3 ecosystems plus a fourth one, I would say, which is chemicals, which is not an ecosystem, but which is actually very pervasive, I would say, contributing into many, many ecosystems. And here, let me just say, I'm very much aware, let me say upfront, that many of you are disappointed that wholesale has not been identified as a separate ecosystem. But I think you will also understand that if you have to divide up the European economy basically in 14 ecosystems, it's not obvious. And I think actually you are faring very well because on the one hand, I mean, you are clearly identified as being part of the retail ecosystem, where wholesalers sell products to retailers, which then end up on supermarket shelves. And this retail ecosystem is one of the ecosystem together with agri-food and health, which I have in my directorate. And of course, I mean, equally importantly, wholesale is part of a number of other ecosystems, such as construction, health, agri-food, low carbon, energy intensive industries, automotive, electronics. I think almost everyone, I mean, textile, tourism. So I think you actually have a very good mix. Because I mean, every time wholesalers are selling a variety of inputs into production or providing complete business solutions based on products which are sold to businesses. So I think here, I mean, this is actually in a way even the biggest share of wholesale business. So just to say, we have you fully on the screen in the context of the ecosystems approach. And we also aware, let me just say that upfront, that I mean, wholesalers have been very heavily impacted by the crisis. I mean, in different ways, of course, depending on the areas in which people are active. I mean, partly it's basically the sort of disappearance of government orders. Partly for food wholesalers, it was closures in the hospitality sector. For the non-food, you had closures of relevant shops. And of course, for business-relevant wholesalers, you had the overall slowdown of the economic activity. But I think it's also fair to say that many wholesalers have actually fared well, have actually proven to be a solution to problems. I understood many of you that, I mean, your role is to provide solution providers. And also, I think many have found, in a way, new ways of acting to address actually the issue of disruptions through their expertise and critical infrastructure. So let's think, for instance, about the chemical sector. So finally, about the industrial strategy and the relevance view, I would just like to mention the Industrial Forum and alliances and clusters. I think the Industrial Forum, as you know, will support the implementation of the industrial strategy. And here, I think wholesalers will be able to play a very important contribution in devising practical solutions to, of course, I mean, well, we all know these famous twin challenges, I mean, sustainability, digitization. So I think that is a relevant part. And then I would also like to strongly encourage wholesalers to explore possibilities to be part of the different industrial alliances and industrial clusters. So, I mean, industrial alliances are really interesting because their objective is to reveal opportunities and also bottlenecks. and they can really serve as an interesting platform to attract private investors and also discuss new business partnerships and models in a transparent way. And then finally, I think clusters are quite important. I mean, we will actually beef up the sort of the joint cluster initiatives through EuroClusters in the second part of the year, where really there are different ecosystems being connected across regions and sectors. And also, I mean, let's not forget, and that's linked to my previous responsibility, we have the Enterprise Europe network with different sector networks being very active in terms of matchmaking, finding customers, clients, etc. So I think all this is, I mean, sort of really in a very sort of short way are issues which I think crucial for wholesalers, and just to reassure that we have you fully on our radar screen.
That is great, Christine, and thank you very much for those words, and they mean a lot to us. And thank you also for pointing out the single market. I think that is really a crucial issue here. And I'm very happy that Bernd is with us today, because I would like to ask you the question, is there a single market for the pharmaceutical wholesalers?
Well, that actually is my first point. That would have been my first point anyway. Single market might be of importance for other wholesalers, but there is no single market for pharmaceutical wholesalers, because most of the products that we are distributing do have national registrations. I mean, the new innovative drugs, they do have European registrations, but that's only a very, very small part. So normally you can't sell an Austrian aspirin in Germany because it simply is not allowed. And this made it even more difficult when at the beginning of the pandemic, when there were the first general lockdowns. Of course, there was a lot of panic buying from patients, fearing that they would not get their medicine, mainly for chronic diseases, which led to days of 3 times the turnover that we normally had. So that was a very, very big challenge. And then in an early stage of the pandemic, there were supply disruptions that we did not experience before. We experienced other supply disruptions. I'll come back to that in a minute. But there were new ones actually for us, like border closures. You have to know that not every pharmaceutical manufacturer has a warehouse in every single European country. So sometimes Austria, for instance, my country is a very small country, and many pharmaceutical manufacturers do not have their warehouses here. So Austria is being supplied from warehouses outside of the country. And there were border closures at the beginning of the pandemic, which led to supply disruptions and put other challenges on us. But generally speaking, actually, I touched that before, shortages have been a huge problem for pharmaceutical wholesalers already before the pandemic. So you have to know that especially cheap products, you know, like the mass products against cholesterol or diabetes, all cheap off-patent products, most of them are being manufactured either in China or in India. So and there often were problems before the pandemic already. And this is why actually the European Commission, Christine surely knows that, runs several initiatives to somehow deal with the shortages and try to mitigate the effect for European patients. That's a major part of EMA's, so the European Medicines Agency's work at the moment, despite from all the vaccines topics that they have. Additionally, actually, wholesalers have been facing demand for products that we were not used to sell before, like masks or disinfectants were not part of our portfolio. But you have to know, I mentioned that before, that wholesalers for the pharmacies, for their customers, are some kind of one-stop shop provider. So basically, if a pharmacy needs whatever they do, they ask their wholesaler first. So it was a challenge actually to source these products because they were very short in the market. And again, there were border closures. Transports of masks have been stopped in certain countries, and the contents of the mask have been confiscated. There were scandals throughout Europe because of that. And Germany had export bans for personal protective equipment. All these things that are actually clearly against the European thought, actually. But I have to say, in the meantime, we've overcome this, fortunately. And supply within Europe is running smoothly again, actually. We have a new challenge that is vaccine distribution, but the normal supply is not worse than it used to be before. That is the good news actually for European patients. But we do have issues with the vaccine distribution in the meantime. I mean, this all happened on very short notice. If I can give you an example of Austria, for instance, we've been told by the middle of December last year that we should start the vaccine distribution as of the end of the year. And I guess you've all heard from the media that especially the messenger RNA vaccines need to be stored at -75 degrees and need to be transported under certain conditions. So this was something that wholesalers have not been used to before, and only a few of us have been dealing with products in such temperature ranges. So there was very, very little time. And of course, at this point of time, demand for ultra freezers, like we call them, was very high on the global market. So it was very, very difficult to get these devices for our warehouses. But as far as I heard throughout Europe, most of the wholesalers managed to get the devices, to set up the processes, and to start delivering vaccines in time. So in Austria, we have already supplied, I think, some 6 million doses to the market, which is, compared to the population of 8 million people, is quite a lot within this short period of time. And it also runs well in other countries. In Germany, wholesalers have started supplying pharmacies with vaccines. In France, and in some countries, pharmacies even vaccinate people. So even here, there is actually, when it comes to healthcare, there is no European healthcare system. Europe's very diversified when it comes to healthcare because of the subsidiary principle for healthcare that leaves it to the member states' responsibility to organize their healthcare systems. This is why we had to adopt to very, very different challenges, but I guess most of our members did a good job. And in vaccines distribution, actually, the problem was the lack of vaccines, not the lack of distribution or wholesaling capacities. And one last point I'd like to touch, I think, Gregor, you mentioned that before, was the industry strategy. And let me mention that at the beginning of the pandemic, it was a big struggle for some pharmaceutical wholesalers to be recognized as part of the critical infrastructure. And even now, there is the directive to enhance resilience of critical entities providing essential services in the EU, and we have to struggle to be recognized as part of the critical infrastructure. Christine surely knows that. And even the ecosystem that you've been mentioning before, at the current stage, wholesalers are not part of the healthcare ecosystem, which is actually strange from our perspective, because if we don't do our job, nobody throughout the whole European Union will get his or her medicine. So if we are not part of the critical infrastructure, who else is? So I'm really asking, but as an association, as GIP, we are in constant contact with the Commission. And I think there is good chance that our sector will be recognized as part of the healthcare ecosystem. And actually, that's what is to tell about our role in the pandemic. Thank you very much, Gregor.
Thank you very much.
I'm not quite sure. Can you hear Gregor? I can't hear him. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I think you're facing some technical. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just frozen. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Bernd, for your explanations. And what I hear from our National Pharmaceutical Distribution Association, I think it works quite well together with our government when it comes to the vaccine distribution. And I think the wholesale sector proves the great value it has due to the experience in distribution and how to deal with this challenging products, because it's complicated. Before I come to a question coming from the audience regarding Jan and Robert's businesses, I would pick up on the single market issue and also on the consequences of the COVID crisis, and come to Clara, because I know the cash and carry business was very hard hit by the crisis, and you also face major challenges in the single market. So I would give you the floor to maybe explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. Some points were already raised by Christine and Bernd. I have to say that at the beginning, if you ask me to say, I mean, I could say that we weathered quite well the storm, but there was a storm in any case. And in the first days, the first week, we needed to massively invest in operations, in arranging our supply chains. Border closures, it was mentioned, but it was also, I would say, like a factor which actually made us even reroute our supply chains. A lot of challenges in Asia even before we went into lockdown. So from I can just say that there was, of course, a lot of pressure on supply chains, but we have also realized that these worked actually pretty well in the last 15 months. As I said, we have to adapt our operations and logistics. The main impact was not that much on our operations, but actually was the consequence of the closure of one of our main customer group. And that's why also the impact of COVID on Metro, but also on food wholesale has been mixed. If I look at the countries where Metro, where the proportion of HoReCa customers is very high, I'm talking about Spain, France, Italy, Western Europe, we had months where our sales went down by 80%, and we are still recovering. So because also the reopening happened a few weeks ago in some countries. If we looked at other countries where the customer group was actually more retailers and even private, like independent businesses, which bought actually for private consumption in some countries at the beginning of the crisis because of the shortages, then the situation is different. So all in all, as I said, we weathered the storm, but of course we are still recovering, and we hope this will pass by. But of course, in the wholesale sector, in the food wholesale, was very different. It was, as I said, mixed. If we look at cash and carry, yes, we had the expertise and we could adjust. Also, in some cases, I'm not talking only about Metro, I'm talking also about other wholesalers, they open up to end consumers. If we look at the delivery service, which was booming before the crisis, this was much more difficult because, of course, all the contracts went stopped. So all in all, I would say there was a very important impact, and what we saw, and this is also the effort we did in the last months, especially during the first months, was to show that actually these sectors, or now as we call it, ecosystems, are very interrelated. If you kind of stop one link of the chain, then this is going to kind of have a knockdown effect on the whole supply chain. So this is basically our main learning from the crisis. And but this also showed, and Christine mentioned that, yes, we could rely on our expertise, and we could rely on at least Metro as a big company, that we have a very diversified supply chain.
Thank you, Clara. I think that's a topic, the diversification of supply chains. I would like to pick up the question from the audience that was hinting to Jan Krückemeyer and Robert Späth. The person is asking, what risk do you see that your vendors are selling their products direct to the market and so to your customers? What strategies do you have? So B2B business is by nature the one in between. So what do you do against the threat that someone is selling directly? I think that is also a challenge due to the transparency that digitalization is driving. What are your answers to that? Robert, do you want to start?
Yes, okay. This was a topic we already discussed a year or two ago, when all the platforms were rising and the digitalization made that possible. And of course, you ask if maybe someday Amazon is delivering chemicals. But in the end, it is a very financially intensive business, because you need very sophisticated sites to handle all these chemicals. So there are just a few sites in around Germany of companies handling commodities to do all this business. So there is such a lot of know-how at the wholesaler. And this is also a point I would like to mention, because I think the wholesaler is indeed some extra sector, because he's managing the supply chain. He has all the data and the know-how how to get supply, even if there are shortages in the market, even if there are problems, and he has all these abilities to really solve it. And he also, of course, also the possibility for storage. Especially if you look at chemicals, storage is a very important point, because most of our customers and also producers don't want to have storage because of all the regulations combined with dangerous goods storages and so on. So there's a really essential function of the wholesaler, and you should, if you want to establish now systems, and I think this is on the horizon for future pandemics or something, to have some security, how to deal with that, talk with the wholesalers and not with the producers, because the wholesalers may suggest solutions that will better work looking to the global market and the global supply chains. So I'm not afraid that digitalization or platform business would take our business now.
That is good to hear, Robert, and thank you for that. Then I would like to ask Jan first, and then Bernd to add their perspective on the, I think, very important question.
Well, actually, this is a very good and also question for the future. As Krückemeier, as a company, we focus to become much more specialized, and now not only are wholesaling and moving boxes from one place to another, but also converting the material that we deal with. So, because we are the experts in this field of adhesives and abrasives, and for example, I have some high-tech precise die cut here, and there are only some hundreds we produce and convert per year. For the producer, this is not efficient. So actually, it's in the supply chain, we are an important link between the industrial business and the producer. The second thing, and Robert already mentioned it, right now there are a lot of products and ingredients with a big shortage. There's a lack of it. But the industrial customers, they need certain articles and products. And since the producers say, hey, our delivery times doubled, sometimes it's 3 times as long as before you can get the product, they turn to us wholesalers and ask, do you have an alternative? Can you manage to get this product, either the original one from the same producer somewhere worldwide, or maybe you have some from some other producer. You have a product with the same features and the same qualities, and you can offer to us, because we need to produce. Now we have the demand again from the markets, from our end consumers, but we cannot produce because we lack certain ingredients, materials, or products in our process. So this is, I think, a very crucial point where wholesale shows how important it is for the whole economic system. And maybe Christine also might keep this for the future on her agenda, that maybe it's worth to have a look at the wholesale business itself as the crucial industry sector.
Thank you, Jan. Bernd, you would like to come in?
Yeah, that's actually funny to hear this question, because in our sector, direct deliveries are part of the normal business. So if you run a pharmacy, especially for OTC drugs, so the over-the-counter that are being sold without prescription, it is actually quite normal that manufacturers supply pharmacies directly. It's a matter of time, I guess, because in this case, deliveries are not short in time, and it's also a matter of money, because normally a manufacturer sells cheaper to a pharmacy than they sell to us. But on the other hand, wholesalers also have services like, in our case, it's mostly the financial service, because we pre-finance the stocks for, on the one hand, the manufacturers, on the other hand, for the pharmacies in between. That probably grants us our fair share for the next years. But what is becoming an additional problem is that in some countries, wholesalers do not have the right to be supplied. I mean, that's probably a regulation none of you has ever heard of. In some countries, pharmaceutical manufacturers have to supply pharmaceutical wholesalers in order to allow them to fulfill their public service obligation. But in other countries, like in Austria, this is not the case, which leads to the fact that especially innovative medicines are often delivered directly from manufacturers to the pharmacies, and that really puts our businesses at risk and in danger. And we are constantly fighting for this right to be supplied, or for the right to buy from manufacturers, in order to be able to fulfill our public service function also in the future. So maybe our sector is a little bit different and maybe further ahead. But I just wanted to let you know, because we don't have these strategies, because it's part of our daily life. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernd. I hope, at least in regard with the highly regulate, or with a high degree of regulation, that is not you are not ahead of the others, because we are very much in favor of less regulation. But there's a lot in the basket, Christine. And I would like to invite you, if you could share your thoughts about the topics that have so far been put on the table.
Yes, sure. And again, I hope I don't get carried away, so then otherwise you stop me. No, I mean on the issue of the dependencies, which were mentioned, I think that is another, I mean, very important, I would say, component of the industrial strategy. Because of course, on the one hand, I mean, that's very relevant for you as a wholesaler. The EU is, of course, I mean, as a major importer and exporter, openness to trade investment is a strength and a major source of growth and resilience. But at the same time, I mean, we've seen now, particularly during the pandemic, but I think it's important that, as was pointed out by some, that you also had issues already pre-COVID. It's not like everything all the shortages only appeared with COVID. We have seen that we were particularly, I mean, vulnerable in our global value chains, specifically with regard to, I mean, non-European technologies or certain inputs. And that's why, I mean, Commission has coined this term, which is, I mean, carefully crafted, of open, I insist on the open as well, strategic autonomy. I think one of the work which has been undertaken is really to carry out an analysis where these dependencies are, how do they function, and you may have seen the analysis which actually went through the trade data in all the different categories, where basically 137 products ended up being identified in sensitive ecosystems for which the EU is highly dependent. And this represents more or less 6% of the EU total import value of goods. And here, I mean, we're talking mainly about raw materials used in energy-intensive industries, of course, about active pharmaceutical ingredients. I mean, it will not have been a surprise to the pharmaceutical wholesalers among us here, but for me, for instance, it was a discovery, and for many others as well, that for such a sort of basic OTC like paracetamol, I mean, almost the entire amount of the active ingredient actually comes from India. And you remember that at some point in time in the COVID crisis, we're even worried about having shortages of this very basic, paracetamol. So when you actually many others, I mean, we're talking about chips now. I mean, but the crucial inputs for, I would say, also for our green and digital transition. So when you go through the analysis, you see that half of the imports for these dependent products originate from China, and approximately 1/4 are actually areas where we don't have necessarily the opportunities to diversify or have alternatives in terms of European substitutions. So I think it's quite major. I would actually like to invite you to if you haven't done yet, to actually read the staff working document where all this is explained. I have to say, for a commission document, I found it really, really interesting. And it's actually, I mean, very often, we always have very balanced documents, and, it's very politically correct. And this one is really a bit more like an academic paper, but a very interesting academic paper. And I would really encourage you to read it, because I think it really is an important also for our further reflection on that. So that's what I just wanted to say on the open strategic autonomy. There, of course, I mean, we are looking now how we can make sure that our supply chains become more resilient, especially also for, SMEs, let's face it, because for them it's much more difficult than for larger, integrated companies. And here again, we are using, European clusters, Enterprise Europe Network, etc. And of course, digital solutions, which were mentioned, such as industrial manufacturing data spaces, are important. But I would also like to comment on what was said in terms of, I think it's very important, it's for all the different sectors, but the issue actually of being providing added value, because it's true. I mean, you have different situations. I think it's interesting that we could contrast here the farmer sector, which on the one hand is heavily regulated, so less single market, but on the other hand, you are maybe more exposed even than others in terms of direct sales. But I think this issue of providing added value, looking sort of at providing solutions for customers, I think that's very important and something which needs to be explored further in the context, I would say, of a deeper ecosystems analysis. And also, I think this, what I took away is that you are, part of the solution of actually also finding alternatives. I think is important. At the moment, in addition to my sort of normal tasks in the directorate, I'm also deputy to the vaccine task force, which was created by my commissioner Thierry Breton on the ramping up of the industrial production for the COVID vaccines. And here we are doing a very interesting exercise. Not very typical normally for a public administration, where we are helping actually companies to find, those lipids or those 2-liter plastic bags which are missing. Again, some companies have their own ways, and they will always find all the ingredients they need, but others are, so especially the smaller ones, have issues. And I think this is really, this is an exceptional situation now, and that's why we have actually created this task force, and we are working with the companies, and we did a major matchmaking event, but we always sometimes act as a clearinghouse. And we even had requests from some companies that they needed desperately 100 skilled workers, and whether we could help them to find them. So this is, I think, not a normal public administration activity, but here I think this is something where wholesalers can also play an important role in really finding, together with the networks we have, like EN and CAS, etc., to find alternatives. So I will stop here. Otherwise, I hope it's not me doing the background noise. I think my mic should be okay, but I hear some background, but I hope it was okay to hear me.
I'm sorry, Kristin. I left my mic open because of the challenges before. So thank you very much for the explanation, and dwelling also on the topic of the open strategic autonomy. I think that is very important, and very important. The global supply chains are very important. And I would like to focus on that topic now. Robert Späth, I would like to ask you, what have been the challenges when it came to disinfection? What's the name? Disinfectants. Because we had the shortages there, and I would be interested, what is your response to that, or the solutions to overcome future shortages, and what do you think about the ideas of getting the production back to Europe?
Well, it was a little bit chaotic, the whole disinfection business, because of the skipping of the biocides regulation to get more supply. But this had strange effects because a lot of people got into the production of disinfectants, and so the market was then had too many disinfections, but not according to the regulations. And then they closed it again so now you can only sell disinfections according to the regulation, and all the disinfection are still in storage that are not be able to use, and this is a problem for waste and so on. Well, but of course nobody asked the chemical distributors. We had a lot of supply of disinfections according to the biocides regulation, and but nobody asked for them anymore because the others were very cheap and a lot of supply. So it got a bit chaotic, and I don't know. I hope there were no bad effects on health using all these things. So first get in communication with the wholesalers. I don't know how to establish this, but it would be good to get platforms how to get in contact in such a situation like the shortage according to the pandemic. And yeah, so this just for these disinfections.
Okay, thank you, Robert. I think we have to come to an end. We only have 3 more minutes left. One important topic that I would like to put on the table is I think we face a real challenge when it comes to how we build resilient supply chains in the future. Because I think everyone agrees that we have to diversify certain supply chains. And one major tool are the trade agreement that we have and that everyone is trying to negotiate at the moment also. However, the support from the public is lacking. And by putting the social and ecological agenda on top of the trade policy agenda makes the life very difficult. And I think it is opposing the idea of diversifying those international trade relationships. Now I speak as BGA, ask would be to keep this in mind and to not lose patience in negotiating new FTAs and, for example, a Mercosur or CETA. But as I understand it, most of the challenges lie with the member states. But I think those trade agreements are crucial for diversifying the supply chains and making it more resilient. Sorry for taking the floor with that topic. Now I would give the floor to everyone for a final round. Clara, what are your asks for the Commission if you could wish for something?
So my ask, actually, Christine already mentioned that. I think keeping the single market open for an international company like us is crucial, but also to create, like we always say that keeping the single market open is the best stimulus package ever. And this is, of course, something we highly appreciate the efforts of the Commission. I also like the support for SMEs, and well, Christine, you are the expert here, and especially during the pandemic. Now regarding the recovery fund, of course, we know that the impact of the Commission on the plans of the member state is limited, but we need to make sure that actually those funds reach the real economy, and especially like the most affected sector. So that would be another ask from our side, maybe on behalf also of our customer base.
Thank you, Clara. Jan.
Yes, thank you. First of all, it's as Clara already mentioned, the open market, the open European single market is very important. And Corona showed last year that the transport from France via Germany to Poland is just not possible because borders are closed. And it takes too long and too much time for products and solutions to get from A to B within our European single market. So the importance, and as already Gregor mentioned, to have the agreements with other countries outside the European Union is very important. Like we are a typical family-owned SME, and we deal with over 70 countries worldwide. The majority in Europe, of course, but also the supply chains are getting larger and wider and more far away from here, which for a small company with 80 people, it's very difficult to handle, especially if there are more and more regulations. And the third thing is, please stop gold plating within the European Union, the member states, that you pass something for the EU and every country, no matter if, I don't want to say, and even my own country, Germany, is not the best to prevent gold plating, to have an eye on that and also sometimes raise your voice if you see that there's too much bureaucracy on certain topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Robert, the floor is yours.
Well, I totally agree to all that. The single market is very important, and it is still far away because it's still not open. So please open it. For example, if I think transporting waste over the borders, there are a lot of innovative business models according to circular economy, for example, but they are not possible through all this bureaucracy. And of course, the other thing is, if you now think about how to make supply chains more resilient, I think you really have to look out not to over-regulate also from the other sector according sustainability and so on. We are very, very strongly working on this issue for many years, but now there are some regulations. So maybe companies think to leave Europe and to have a easier going outside Europe. So you have to prevent this leakage as well. So have a look at the regulations. Do not over-regulate. Open the markets, because the markets have this tremendous function of a very good optimization of supply chains. And of course, the aim of resilience and the aim of sustainability, this I agree totally, but not via these more regulations. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert, very much. And now we come to the highest regulated market. Bernd, what are your wishes? More regulation? Your mic is mute.
You're right. This is one of my points. But first of all, again, the recognition of the role of full-service healthcare distributors as part of the critical infrastructure, I think, is absolutely key for us. The second one, as you mentioned, is a fair and monitored implementation of existing regulation. I guess the Commission knows that as well. And the third point I've been mentioning as well is addressing the issue of medicine shortages or the resilience of the pharmaceutical supply chain on a European level. I know that this is happening already. There is this structured dialogue that the Commission launched in April. I'm part of one work stream there, the resilience or the robustness of the pharmaceutical supply chain. So there is a lot that is going on at the moment. And I think Christine knows very well what I'm talking about, so I'll keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernd. So the final word has the Commission. Christine, do you have any messages to the wholesalers, to the audience?
Yes, I mean, I could also formulate messages to the Commission, but that might not be the right place to do it. No, I mean, on the single market, again, I mean, I fully heard you. You heard what I said at the beginning. And, in a even previous life before SMEs, I was director for single market governance at a time when I would say the enthusiasm for the single market was rather moderate. We're always quoting Jacques Delors, who said, you don't fall in love with the single market. And I think if COVID has made one thing is that people have realized what it means if you don't have a single market. I mean, I'm not saying we have it all over now, but I think the complete disruption with the border controls showed us again, on the one hand what we have achieved, but also how important it is to preserve it. On the gold plating, I couldn't agree more. This is something we have been struggling for a long time. The Fit for Future platform, gold plating is one of the specific issues, the better regulation which we are addressing. It's always a bit delicate because sometimes member states will tell you they have very good reasons, but I think this is, I'm not saying that occasionally, I'm sure we also have European legislation which is excessive, but unfortunately many times the biggest problems for companies come from the gold plating. So I think at least this is now recognized in some member states. We have invited member states to actually signal gold plating. I mean, we didn't get a lot of measures notified because, of course, member states don't like to highlight this. But I think there is something, movement happening in this context. And then in general, on the admin burden, indeed, I think this is crucial. And also, we didn't have time to touch upon this, but I think also for the future due diligence legislation in the pipeline, we will be watching very carefully that I think very good intentions which are there to have more sort of sustainable supply chains and also basically showcase, I think, the European sustainable approach, that it doesn't sort of end up in an excessive burden. And I think it's very important. And we're just going through this now in the context. I'm also responsible for REACH, for the chemical legislation. We obviously don't want this to happen, that companies end up producing somewhere else and then the imported products come back because of legislation which is tightened up in a way in Europe that it actually goes outside. So I see you agreeing with me. That's good. And I'm counting on your, of course, input and very concrete input. And I would really encourage you that beforehand, please make sure that be it the industrial forum, be it sort of other opportunities to really, voice your concerns. I myself and my people, we are always very open, to get input. And if we can find a solution, we always try to. And we live, it's much more difficult now in these virtual times. Normally, I'm always a lot also in member states, talking to companies, etc. Now it's all virtual, but we really need to get this specific, input and feedback from you. And on the finally, on the dialogue on the structural issues in the supply chain for pharmaceuticals, I think this is really a major endeavor. I'm very glad that you cooperate in one of the work streams. So I hope that this is really a long-term issue, which independently of the current COVID shortages, this is a much more long-term issue also for therapeutics, that we can actually address issues there. So, thank you very much. For me, it was a very interesting, I have to say, exchange. I learned a lot from you as well. So I'm looking forward to continue the discussion.
Thank you very much, Christine. Nothing to add that I have. We feel our issues in good hands with you and try our best to provide all the specific information that you need, because we are aware that we only get into our goal when we provide the information for concrete policy measures. So thank you very much. In the end, what remains for me is to thank very much also for that we can be part of the Industrial Forum as EuroCommerce. And me personally, we are very glad to share this platform, and thank you for establishing this kind of exchange and also to broaden the horizon and not only concentrating on the manufacturing sector, but also trade and services. Thank you for that. And then I would very much thank also Philippe Delpech and Laura Mack in the background also. Philippe Delpech moderated the first session for organizing this event. Before I give now the floor to Christian Verschuren for the closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Gregor, and thank you to all the participants. I've had a fantastic afternoon, and still, even after 10 years at EuroCommerce, have learned a lot from our members. I really also appreciate that we've had a very good exchanges with the European Commission, with William Neal and Christine Schreiber, whom I really wanted to thank you for their engagement. I hope all of you who have been participated, and we had, by the last count, 150 registered participants. So think that is in itself as a major success and certainly a record. Participants from the wholesale and retail community, because at the end of the day, we are one family, even though the retailers are serving direct consumers and customers, and our wholesalers friends are serving business customers. But we are all in the distributive trade and providing added value. And I hope this day has enabled really to lift the veil, as the ambitions of the title said it, to lift the veil on the somewhat unknown, wholesale sector, and giving you a really clear perspective on how the wholesale sector is very much at the center of the European economy, which is also the title of a recent report we did on wholesale. And we're at the center of Europe. Wholesale is at the center of Europe's economy, not only because it is represented by more than 10 million enterprises, indeed many micro enterprises and small and medium enterprise by the majority, not only because it provides employment to more than 10 million people, not only because it is responsible for indeed 5% of employment and more than 600 billion euro of added value, as our President Régis said at the very beginning. And these are hard facts and in themselves an important contribution. But also because, and this is very much what we have heard from the panels, how very much the wholesale sectors and the individual enterprises are at the core also of serving Europeans, serving European industries, European customers, and also part of the digital and green transition. A few things that are very essential for because between the manufacturing sector and the business customers, there is a lot of added value in between, in terms of storage, in terms of, as we heard from Jan Krückemeier, in terms of integrating some of the fine-tuned, tailored, manufacture for the end customers, in terms of, providing very rapid delivery, 2.5 hours on average for any pharmaceuticals. We heard from Bernd Grabner. I mean, this is quite amazing, and that is actually the added value of the agility and the services, provided by the wholesalers. We also heard that despite all the talks of disintermediation and direct selling, which indeed is happening in pharmaceutical, is happening in a number of other areas in electrical material, I was struck by Philippe Delpech's point, which says that roughly it's 1/3 direct sales by the industry, by the manufacturers, and 2/3 going through a specialized distribution channel like wholesale. And he was saying that despite digitalization, despite the changes and the evolution, that sort of 2/3, 1/3 is there to stay, and has been there for a long time, and that is also, I think, an important element which shows the value of the wholesale industry and the wholesale businesses. I was also very interesting to hear the examples, and Dorothee Arns particularly highlighted the great examples from the chemical wholesalers, and how the sector is participating in the circular economy, in circular approach, having certain initiatives there, and whereby even the chemical sector, I think, which is not always one that you would think immediately in terms of circularity, but is engaged in some of those issues and participating in collecting used chemicals and enabling to have those having 5-6 different lives. I mean, I used to work in the paper and packaging industry, and we also say that the paper can have a number of cycles still being used, and that is the examples that FACC was highlighting. I want to, as I mentioned, FACC want to particularly thank our partners that were engaged with us in organizing and setting up this program. Of course, most notably BGA and Gregor Wolf, but also the EU, the Electrical Wholesalers Union, EU, EW, FACC, and GIRP, the pharmaceutical wholesalers who joined us recently, and I think I can probably also associate, or Finnish ETU Wholesale Member Association was also represented here today on the panel, who have really helped actually making the case for wholesale. My third point is indeed what Gregor also asked all the panelists in terms of what do we need from the regulators and from the EU in particular. And on the panel on the circular economy, we heard loud and clear a need for further harmonization in terms of definitions, in terms of what do we mean by circular economy, what do we mean by a secondary product, further harmonization and standardization in the waste legislation. Again, I was struck by the example given by Dorothee Arns on Denmark and its 98 municipalities, even for countries very well organized but only 5 million people with 98 municipalities. And even there, like everywhere in Europe, you have very different ways of collecting waste, and therefore is also a barrier to arrive at significant scale in creating secondary material and a full circular economy industry. So that is one point where clearly message to the European Commission. Another that we heard at the panel just recently is when you deal with open strategic economy, and yes, we need to look at dependencies. There's probably a need to repatriate, or making sure that we have certain dependency on we avoid some dependency on critical materials within European Union, but that we also keep open trade, because at the end of the day, security of supplies is by ensuring the diversity of suppliers. And even if we would have had, I always use this example, full manufacturing of paracetamol, of masks within Europe, with the huge demand, Europe would not have been able to satisfy all the demand that was there. Same for respirators and other devices when we're dealing with a huge crisis. Therefore, keeping trade open is very important within the single market, of course, first and foremost, but also more globally on an international basis. So that is also something that is very important. And we heard loud and clear, please avoid gold plating. If you have legislation at the European level, make sure that your legislation is fit for purpose. That's what the REFIT program was intended to do. And that gold and member states refrain from indeed adding additional requirements that actually are breaking up the single market in a fragmented landscape of very diverse, or sometimes very diverse and different national legislation. So that was basically my take of the afternoon, and I hope you have enjoyed that. These sessions have been recorded, so please go on our website. When you go EuroCommerce Policy Talks, you can find and watch again, pass it on to your colleagues who have not been able to attend today and where you found it interesting. Let me, just by concluding, thank all the speakers and the moderators, and of course, starting en tout bien tout honneur with our friends from the European Commission, William Neal and Christine Schreiber. Also all our members, Dorothee Arns, Thierry Munier, despite the difficulties in connecting and things happening in his life, made the effort to be part of it and share his insights from Nexus Automotive. Salamari Mihonen from Finland, Bernd Grabner from GIRP, Clara Salaric from Metro, Robert Speth from Jekle Chemie, and of course Gregor Wolf, our dear Vice President from the BGA, and my colleague Christel Delberg, who I really want to thank specifically, who together with the members of her team, Laura Mack, who is in charge of wholesale at EuroCommerce, and also Vincent Iwelo and Rémi Guastali in our communication, who made all this program a reality, a very nice program. And despite the fact that this is happening online, I thought was a very lively discussion. So on that note, thank you all very much for having listened and participating in this session. I wish you all a good evening, and please continue to follow us on our wholesale activity in EuroCommerce. Thank you very much.